The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I am happy to have you here. I hope you've had a really fantastic week, and we've all recovered from the elections, all of that good stuff. I want to let you know that actually tonight is a pre-recorded show, so if you get into the chat room and ask me questions I will not be able to ask because I am in Laughlin, Nevada right now, speaking at the Starworks International Symposium, which will be a great, great fun. So look at my Facebook, and you can get updates and see all of the exciting events that are taking place down there. It is very, very cool. I want to just say that I am incredibly grateful for the people that are out there supporting this show. I want to say thank you again to Irv Brock, who was kind enough after Fran Ridge's show to donate money to NICAP. And he's been posting pictures with his friends and the NICAP hats. Way to go, Irv. This is so important to donate to organizations like NICAP, like NARCAP. They really provide excellent information for all of us, and we need to make sure that they have adequate funding. So thanks, Irv. My guest tonight is somebody that I met through MUFON, and he has been a mentor to me, especially with regard to radar cases. Robert Powell has been around in the field for a long, long time, and his work is exemplary. He has a BS in chemistry and is a former collegiate debater. That's pretty cool. He has authored, he's one of the authors of a detailed radar witness report to the Stevensville Lights. And all of you out there know about the Stevensville Lights. If you don't, you need to look this up. It's a really important case that you need to find out about. Robert is a member of the Society for Scientific Exploration and the National Space Society. He lives in Austin, Texas, and has 28 years of experience in engineering management in the semiconductor industry. He was there from 1978 to 2006. He has accomplished amazing things with regard to this and helped develop the first flash memory technology that was used for flashcards and cameras, PCs, video cameras. His experience includes managing the state-of-the-art chemistry laboratory and managing a research and development group that worked on nanotechnology using atomic force microscopes, near-field optical microscopy, and other techniques. He is the holder of 4 patents related to nanotechnology, and he is also an important part of MUFON, which he joined in 2006. He is the director of research at MUFON and has helped establish and develop MUFON's Science Review Board and is the current leader. He's Texas State Section Director, an active field investigator, and on MUFON's STAR team. He is going to be talking today about a really important piece of work, a book that I have sitting right in front of me that he co-authored and had a list of all of the important researchers in this field. And this book is called UFOs and Government, a Historical Inquiry. He co-authored this with Michael Swords. And this is a must-have if you are serious about researching this. You can find it on Amazon.com. But Robert, I am so happy to have you here. And like I said, you've been so kind and willing to help me with things and hold my hand when I'm doing FOIA requests. I really appreciate it.
Well, hi, Erica. I'm glad to be on your show. glad to help you whenever I can.
I know you are so kind that way. I think sometimes when there are new researchers or people that aren't necessarily skilled with the scientific method and all of these important things, it's great to find somebody like you who is patient and wants to teach younger people. That's great.
Yeah, to me, that's something that's important, not just in ufology, but in life in general, right? There's no reason we shouldn't all be that way.
I agree. And when I think about every day, I'm learning something more about you. And when I picked up UFOs and government, I couldn't believe it because the people you worked with on this, oh my gosh, and you're friends with all of these people.
Yeah, I must give a lot of the credit to the book UFOs and Government to those researchers, especially Michael Swords, Jan Aldrich, and Barry Greenwood. I kind of was the organizer and the basically organizer to making sure that it all came together. But those three guys have spent most of their life basically researching at university archives and the national archives to get basically gigabytes and gigabytes of information on this topic.
And, I'm fortunate too. Barry Greenwood has been so kind to me as well and has really helped me with all of these documents and archives. And I sit in absolute awe of him because he has done something that most people will never ever do in their life. And his dedication is important. And a lot of people don't even know who he is, which just shocks me.
Yeah, those guys are the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of researching what I call the true blue UFO cases.
He is. And I have to just say that if you go to Barry Greenwood Archives, you can see all of his work. And then on the NICAP website too, you've got work from all of these people. And it's great to read. And for me, having a knowledge of the history is so important because things just changed from the 40s to the 50s to now. And I would love for you to kind of talk about that and how things have changed since the beginning of all of this.
Yes, I'd like to do that. UFOs and Government is basically a history book. I mean, it's 600 pages. It's 8 by 11 sheets. So this is a very large book. There's over 1,000 reference endnotes, and those are all references to government documents, basically. It took us 5 years to complete the book from when we started.
Oh
we
my
started
gosh.
in early 2007. We basically all got together in Dallas, Texas, met, and we kind of did a brainstorm on what type of book we wanted to write. We wanted something that was collegiate and that universities and young people would read. And so that's how we got started. And it took us until 2012 before we completely finalized the book. It took over 1 year just to go through the photo copyright issues because there are lots of copyright issues in photos, and we've got a lot of photos in that book. Go ahead. Did you say something, Erica?
Oh, did you? No, I was just saying that there are a handful of books that I recommend now that I've really found, and this and Observing UFOs by Dr. Haines. Oh my gosh, you couldn't ask for better information.
Oh, yeah, I agree. That's a very good book. Clear Intent
Yes.
by Barry Greenwood is a very good book. The UFO Experience by Alan Hynek. I think that's an excellent book. And as you mentioned, our book is available on Amazon. And if anyone wanted a signed copy, basically the cost is the same as on Amazon, except I add a $3, cost for mailing it via media mail. Because this book, each of these books, the hardback copy, for example, I would say it weighs close to 4 to 5 pounds. And the paperback copy is just a little bit lighter.
It's a substantial book, and I might have to send my copy off to you and have you, sign it. That would really mean a lot to me.
Oh, I'm glad to. Or the next time we run into each other at the next conference, I'm glad to sign it for you.
Oh, that would be so great. It's been such a treat to get all of these wonderful books that have signatures from the authors. It means a lot to me. But have you been successful in selling this book? Has it caught on?
The book exists in over 90 different universities throughout the United States and the world. And that was our main objective, was to make sure that the younger generation coming up can actually get a hold of a book that they could use to write a paper or anything along those lines.
That's wonderful. And we don't see that a lot. I think you'll agree with me on this, but we see so much fluff with regard to this and you can just kind of maybe even look at who's speaking at some conferences and it's the same kind of thing a lot, and you get things that aren't necessarily verifiable, that are being given out like it's the gospel. And so it's important to understand the work of all of you and the fact that you are very, very careful with your research.
Right. And we don't really go into extreme detail on any specific case. What we try to do is give the reader a very broad historical view of how the UFO phenomenon really took off during and after World War II up to the modern day. Now, that doesn't mean that the UFO phenomenon didn't exist, hundreds or perhaps even thousands of years ago, but basically it became kind of front and center of the population starting in World War II.
And that would be with all the Foo Fighter sightings.
Right. Yes. The Foo Fighter sightings is where it began. And when it first started, it was taken very seriously by the United States government. At the time, World War II just ended. You had Russia, then of course called the Soviet Union, and the United States towards the end of the war were basically racing into Germany to try to capture the German scientists, because the most elite and best scientists of the world at the end of World War II were German scientists. And so each country, the United States and the Soviet Union, got the biggest shares they could obtain, and we brought those German scientists back to the United States, and the Soviet Union did the same. And so when UFOs first took off in the continental United States in 1947 with Kenneth Arnold, the concern of the military was, if the Soviets figured something out with their German scientists that we have not figured out with our German scientists. So that was the first view of the UFO from the military national security perspective. Is this something that we have to be concerned because it's Soviet? And as the investigations continued, as those first months wore off, it became clear to the Air Force guys investigating it that this was not Soviet. They didn't have an answer to the phenomenon, but it did not take them long to determine this was not a Soviet threat. As time went on, and this was during the very early formation, which was called Project Sign, the guys who led Sign, they wrote up what's called an estimate of the situation. That's a common military term when you're basically giving a big picture view of a project that you're working on. And so in the estimate of the situation, the guys who headed up Sign, who had investigated over 150 of the first UFO reports, indicated that they did not believe it was Soviet. And they also said, but they could not rule out the possibility that it could be some type of craft from another world. So when they wrote this report and it, went up to get signatures, it passed through the military chain of command until it got to the head guy in the Air Force at the time, Vandenberg.
Mm-hmm.
And when Vandenberg saw in their conclusion the possibility that this was extraterrestrial, I mean, he batted it right down and he said, there's no evidence of this, and we're not going to even bring this possibility up. And at that point, they disbanded SIGN and replaced it with a new group called Project Grudge. So that's kind of the very early beginnings of the UFO phenomenon. And, one of the interesting parts is you see, as you look at that beginning, it wasn't just the Air Force that was interested. And you see the same things happening in history back then that you see happen today, not in the world of ufology, but just in our gigantic military industrial bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
You had the CIA and the Navy wanting in. They wanted to be involved. The reason is that was considered the hot topic of the day, and they didn't want the Air Force to get all of the glory. And you had the other same thing you see today with, okay, the CIA knows something, well, they're not going to tell the Air Force. And the Air Force knows something, and they're not going to tell the Navy and the CIA. There was this lack of cooperation that existed then just as existed today. So, when you saw 9/11 happen and you wonder, why weren't all our agencies working together? It's basically the same, human frailties of, trying to protect information that someone has from other outside groups. So that's an interesting part of the book also.
It is, and it just is so, it's just, it's the way it goes. There's always dysfunction in every organization, and I think it's with regard to this. My Lord, this is the most important thing that anybody will ever know about.
Oh yeah, we even have a case that we document in there occurred in the early 1950s, and these are all in government documents. The Secretary of the Navy actually had a UFO go by his aircraft as he was flying in that aircraft. So he told the pilot, I want this reported to Project Blue Book, and I want to hear what the Air Force, finds out about this and what they can tell me. And so they report it to the Air Force, and the Air Force just kind of doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. So the Secretary of the Navy gets upset, and he's like, okay, I'll just have the Navy investigate this. And, it's just another one of those turf battles that begins.
Yeah, and it's just so unfortunate. And I want to go back to a little bit the estimate of the situation, because was that document has never been recovered, has it?
That's correct. No one has ever found the estimate of the situation. Whatever documents and the actual reports that were written, they've all been destroyed. The only reason we know it exists is there were various individuals during that time who saw the document and indicated that there was that document. So we know it existed, and we know that there was a meeting to discuss the estimate of the situation, but the actual reports no longer exist.
You don't think there's any chance it could just be sitting in the boxes at the National Archives?
Oh, that's always a possibility. You're right, Erica. That could, so often people find interesting documents simply because they get lost somewhere or they get misplaced, and then they find them. A lot of times, these documents aren't necessarily destroyed intentionally, although I'm sure that does happen on occasion. But they basically get boxed and they get stuck into a corner over the decades, right? Because this is something that happened 60 years ago.
Wow.
And then, at some point in time, someone may have decided, it could have been 40 years later. Whoever was over a bunch of boxes may have said, well, those are old. We don't need them anymore. Get rid of them. Or they could still be sitting somewhere.
That would be the discovery of a lifetime, but there are, my gosh, when you look at the National Archives, they've they're finding things and they're just sitting there waiting for people to go in, like Barry Greenwood or some of these researchers, Jan Aldrich, that have just go in there. I can't believe how much time they take to go through these things, and it's tedious work.
Oh yeah, it's very tedious. Mike and I went to Cushing Archival Library, which is Texas A&M in College Station, Texas. Everyone's probably heard of Texas A&M in terms of their football team.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they've got a regular college library, but they also, and most universities have what they call their archival library, where they keep old material. And Roy Craig, who basically became the number 2 guy in the Condon Committee report. So he was Condon's right-hand man after Rob, can't remember Rob's last name, got fired. And so he's got all his writings and reports are there at the Cushing Library. So Mike and I, we spent an entire day, 8 hours, going through all of those files that he had, copying, the files that were of most value. And there are lots of places in the United States where these type of documents exist, and someone hasn't, simply hasn't gone through them until we went through those. And I believe that was in the year 2010, somewhere right around 2010 or 11. No one had gone through the Roy Craig files that we're aware of.
And that's just mind-boggling to me. And now you hear of all these great researchers that are passing away, and their files are getting tossed in the trash, all their decades-long worth of research. And you just, it's such a heartbreaking thing that everything is out there, but it would be great if younger people would want to take some time and do some digging and go to the libraries and reach out to older investigators.
Yeah, the libraries are becoming so digital now that libraries are actually burning books. It's like Fahrenheit 454 for whoever's read that book, and all they keep digital copies of what they want, and they may have old books that have never been digitized, but they're not going to take the time to do it, so they just get rid of the books.
Oh my gosh, that's just heartbreaking to me. I love books. In fact, I think I'm becoming a bit of a book hoarder, which my husband gets a little freaked out about sometimes, but it's just I love having a paper copy in my hand. I love looking at a book and having that there, especially when it has historical significance. It's really, really cool. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back with Robert Powell, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the groundbreaking book, UFOs and Government, a historical inquiry, and then some of his thoughts on how we can move forward and encourage a younger generation. I am Erica Lukes. This is UFO Classified, and we will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Erica Lutz, and I'm so happy to be here tonight. I want to remind you that I've had to pre-record my show this evening because I am in Laughlin, Nevada at the Starworks Symposium, meeting my friends from all over and learning new things. It'll be a great time. So make sure you go to my Facebook page, UFO Classified, for the updates. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you all there. I want to just tell you that up the next hour, I have got somebody who has been on my show a couple times. This is his third time. It is an honor. Dr. Richard Haines from NARCAP will be on talking about his book, CE5. Right now, I have somebody that is just brilliant and kind and has done a lot of work in this field. And I definitely think that Robert Powell is one of those people that you're so kind. And I really appreciate that, Robert. You're a mentor for people, and that's important because there's so many people that are coming into this that need to have good tools. They need to understand the historical significance, and sometimes it's hard for new people coming into this to find that.
Yes, I agree with you. Sometimes it is difficult, and I'm always glad to help people when I can, and thank you for those compliments, Erica.
Oh my gosh, no, it's so true. I remember, when I did my first FOIA, we had that mass sighting here back in 2014. And I came to you and just said, what am I going to do? And you recommended reaching out to William Puckett from UFOs Northwest and another MUFON field investigator. And William has helped me on 3 cases now. One, we're just waiting for the radar to come back. But that was a really cool thing. And I think a lot of investigators don't know how to do a FOIA. And sometimes good cases slip through the cracks because we don't get in there and try to get information like that that's valuable.
Oh, you're right. There are lots of good cases that they just never get investigated properly.
So what would, if you've got somebody that's new in the field, what would be your biggest advice for them?
Well, I would say read 2 or 3 very good books on UFOs. And I think it's important to understand the history of UFOs. So I would recommend UFOs in Government, simply because it's a great reference book. They'll always be referencing to it, and it does give you a very good historical context for the phenomenon. And I would also recommend Hynek's book, The UFO Experience, and Sturrock's book, Peter Sturrock, who was a PhD in physics, who wrote 2 very interesting books. One is The UFO Enigma, and the other is A Tale of Two Sciences. Both those books are very good. So I would, for a new investigator, I would start and get the background. And then the other thing that is valuable is a good understanding of how to interview people. Usually someone with a law enforcement background has a good feel for that already,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or someone with a science background. But there's definitely a process that should be used when interviewing a witness in order to get the most information that you can. And then once that part is started, it's really just using the scientific process, right? Okay, you get the facts in front of you. You look to see if there are some normal explanations that you can come up with, and then you basically go from there.
That's great advice and wonderful book suggestions. And I'm wondering, because that I worked on Project Orange, and Bob Spearing is carrying that on, and I'm doing research here as well with regard to that. But for me, when I was looking through the database, I would notice that there was a tendency for field investigators to shoot down things or to look at a case with bias, which isn't part of the scientific method, where it's a light in the sky case, so it has to be, a Chinese lantern, it has to be something like that. But they didn't dig any further. And so I think that it's a hard thing to approach this without bias.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you really have to stay open-minded from the beginning, and try to keep your prejudices out of it. We all have prejudices. There's no way to avoid that, but you just have to be aware of them and keep them out. I mean, I've seen cases where it was clear that the field investigator wanted, for example, to classify it as a Chinese lantern, which if that's what it is, that's fine. But they never even bothered to get the wind direction at the various altitudes so that they could make that determination, or bothered to determine from the witness how long did you see these lights, right? Because a Chinese lantern burns for a certain period of time. It doesn't burn for an extended period of time.
Right.
So, you have that where someone immediately, wants to classify it as that. And then you have someone else on the other end of the spectrum that begins their interview with a witness by saying, I suspect you saw a gray alien. Could you describe this gray alien for me? Right? And the witness never even said that. And they, they just put words in the witness's mouth. So, you have both extremes, and it's important to be open, like you said, be open-minded.
Right. And you really have to engage your critical thinking skills. And that's important. And, as much as I would like every case that comes in to be something anomalous, I know that's not the case. And people do make mistakes when they're observing things. And hopefully, we'll give people in the public the tools to learn how to be better observers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and I have to ask you too, because I've been, looking from the Foo Fighters on, the Ghost Rockets, looking at some of these different types of anomalous light phenomenon and things, and they don't appear to be changing over the decades. What is your thought on that?
Well, it is interesting. As far as I can determine, there has been a change in the shapes of objects, and sometimes the way those objects also behave over the decades, which is somewhat strange. For example, everything began with the disc, the typical flying saucer disc. And then in the 1980s, the triangle really took hold. Now, to be fair, it did not just begin in the 80s. There are triangle cases that go back into the 40s and 50s. But in the 80s, it really took off. And as best as I can determine, some of that is due to the advent of the B-2 bomber and the F-117. But there's a significant increase that you just can't place it on those two particular aircraft as the cause of triangular reports. So a shift in shape is one thing I've seen. Another change, for example, is how UFOs affect automobiles and radios. In the 70s, and this is where, the movie Close Encounters occurred, right? If everyone in your audience has seen that movie, you see a car moving along and all of a sudden it dies because this UFO is right over it. That was actually fairly, and I'm not going to say it happened all the time, but there were many instances of that in the 1960s and 1970s. But in modern times, it's now more of a rarity. It's not very often that you run into cases where there's a clear-cut electromagnetic interference with something such as a radio or an automobile. So that's something that's changed over time.
And that's interesting. But with regard to, aviation, I mean, are we still seeing the types of electromagnetic interference with regard to aircraft? Or is that tapered off too?
Yeah, that's tapered off too, right? You have the famous case back in, 1976 in Tehran, where two US F-4 Phantom jets being flown by, at that time, our allies, the Iranians. were affected in terms of the ability to do anything except fly the aircraft. And, that's very unique. I mean, today we can, with an EM pulse, you can totally disable an aircraft, but we can't just disable the communications and just disable the weapon system without disabling the ability to fly the aircraft. So that's very unique when something like that happens.
That is unique. And it is interesting to see how that's changed a bit. Do you think that their technology is adapting and it tried to mirror ours, or what would you, I know it's just speculation, so it's hard to say, but.
Yeah, it's very difficult to say. It's, you can't, like you said, it's pure speculation. You wonder, okay, is this a different, ET that, did one ET come by during the 40s and kind of get tired of us and leave, and another ET showed up in the 50s, and there's no way to really know why those differences occurred other than to try to log them and keep track of them.
Right.
One thing I wanted to mention, I give talks at libraries about this book all the time. And usually there will be anywhere from 20 to 40 people that will show up. And one of the most interesting parts of that is, and every time I do this, I always ask the audience, and this is something J. Allen Hynek always used to do. I'll say, how many of you guys have seen a UFO? And there's usually a pretty good number. And of course, that's kind of why they came to hear my talk. So, for example, I may have 15 or 20 hands pop up that said, yes, they've seen a UFO. Then I ask, well, how many of you have reported a UFO? And it's like almost every hand drops. There might be one or two that stay up and the rest drop. And it is pretty close to what Hynek quoted, which was 90% of people don't report a UFO when they see it. But then when I'm done with my presentation and finish talking, there's always one or two also that come up after everything's, and everyone's left, because they want to ask me, or actually they want to tell me about their UFO experience, but they don't want anyone else to hear about it.
Isn't that heartbreaking? I mean, to me, when I have people that, I've had witnesses call me, and you've probably had this too, where they're, they haven't even told their spouses about their sightings. And that's just, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, one of the authors on our book, Richard Thiem, he's a world-renowned speaker, and he mostly talks at hacker conferences, which are conferences related to, hidden information and things like that. It's not what we used to think of as a hacker, someone that breaks into people's email accounts. Mm-hmm. It's not that type of a hacker conference. It's much more legitimate. I mean, the CIA, the NSA, all of these organizations go to the hacker conferences to learn, what's the latest, greatest that's going on out there. But one of the things he talks about is the similarities between an individual, for example, who works for the CIA and has secrets that he cannot tell his wife or anyone, and a person who witnesses a UFO up close, so close that there's no doubt what they've seen. And they both have the same psychological problem. It's almost like a post-traumatic stress type of issue where they can't tell anyone about what they've experienced. In the case of the UFO guy, right, it's because people would think he's crazy. And in the case of the CIA agent, it's because, he's been sworn to secrecy. So it's like you've got this heavy story on your chest, but you can't tell anyone. And it causes all sorts of psychological issues with people.
Yes, you're right. And I think the phenomenon in and of itself, even if you do talk about it, I think it can still over time cause psychological problems. I mean, there's so much more that goes into this that people don't have a clue about. And I think when you're young and just researching this and thinking it's cool to investigate UFOs, you don't understand the gravity or the impact that it will have on you.
Oh, you're right. The human part of this is just as valid and interesting as the UFO topic itself.
So how, I mean, with your time in the field, and you've been involved with a lot, and you've seen a lot of different personalities, and there's always ego involved, and it's interesting to watch that aspect of human interactions. But what have been your biggest frustrations in the field?
Well, for me, probably the biggest, there's two large frustrations. One is, I think the military, back in 1953 with the Robinson panel and then the Condon report in 1969, have done a very effective job of making the topic taboo. In other words, now if you talk about a UFO, it's almost like you talk about having seen a ghost. It gives the same type of impact.
Mm-hmm.
So that is frustrating because they've done such a good job that I don't even think they need to do it anymore. And then because it's now been compounded by ufologists who want to they move so far away from the science of it, and they basically do what the media loves, right? The media doesn't care about radar data. They don't care about the specific information. They want a cool story with a picture of an alien, even if it's blurry. That's what they want, or pictures of lights in the sky. And so then that just compounds the issue of not being able to keep the topic serious. And I think the topic deserves serious review. Anyone who reads the book will see that towards the end, what we conclude is the Air Force never did figure out what the UFO phenomenon was all about. It was just a monkey on their back that they wanted to get rid of because it was causing them too much grief with Congress. So they got the monkey off their back, and because, I mean, they're not a scientific organization. They were not equipped to properly analyze an unusual phenomenon such as this. And so now it's basically just been tossed aside, and other than a few ufologists here and there, it's not properly analyzed anymore.
And that to me is stupefying because, I live here. I live 80 miles away from Dugway Proving Ground, and there are always reports, and there have been for decades, over one of a really frightening place, just like the nuclear installations. And so to me, to not take this seriously and understand that this is a national security threat, we've lost touch with that, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you think, with regard to evidence, we talk a lot about radar data and all of the good evidence that we need to gather. Do you think sometimes because we want to have all of this great evidence that it's kind of taking us away from where we need to go with research? I mean, would these advanced civilizations really leave a lot of evidence behind?
So that's my view. I don't think they would leave, that you would expect them to leave any evidence behind. And that's my personal prejudice against Roswell, for example. My view is that any civilization capable of traveling here is going to be hundreds of years more advanced than us. And I would have a hard time seeing first that, they traveled across intergalactic space just to crash when they got to Earth. But even if they did, I think the first thing they would do is retrieve not only the craft, but any occupants that had been in that craft. So I don't, to me, there's not going to be any significant evidence left behind. If there is, it's going to be very minute trace evidence, such as the effects of the EM field that comes from the craft. Or perhaps if the craft touches a tree or touches on the ground, we can actually detect any type of material that touched down on the ground, because everything leaves a very small, minute portion of itself behind in terms of, metals or anything like that. So that's our best chance at getting any type, of actual evidence.
And that's, to me, I agree. And what I want to do, and I'm trying to do here in Utah, is to, obviously look at the data, figure out where there's appear to be sightings clusters. And I believe that there are places like that all over the world, and then get good equipment out there to do field research. And I think that, that's kind of the next step. We need to, instead of just sitting behind a computer and investigating a case with a phone call, we've got to get out there and be really active.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I mean, you really, on a good case, you have to go meet with the witness, and you have to be where he was at when he had his experience, whatever it was he saw. That's the best way to get, the information you need. Otherwise, you're losing a lot of good potential info.
Absolutely. And to me to actually, now that technology is coming down in price and things, it makes it so great for us to have infrared technology. We can get out there and do good work. And then with the internet, we have the ability to talk to researchers all over the world, and say, hey, what did you get last night? And compare notes. And I think it's a really powerful time for all of us if we learn how to work as a cohesive unit. I think we could accomplish great things.
Yeah. My favorite example in terms of, trying to understand the UFO phenomenon. Imagine if you could send an F-16 fighter jet, a squadron of them, back to the day of Columbus, 500, 600 years ago. What are they really, the people of that time, what could they really understand or figure out? And what you have to realize is 500 years from now, the difference between that and our current civilization will be 3 times or more the difference between our civilization today and the civilization of Columbus. That seems like, how can that be? Well, the reason is science doubles almost every 7 years. So
yes, it does.
Right. So the difference between a society 500 years from now and us is much more great than our society and that of Columbus. And imagine,
absolutely. Oh my gosh,
and
I'm
try
so
to figure anything out.
Well, exactly. And I just think oh my gosh, we're just living in an exciting time, and we have to be mindful and think of exactly what you just said. And Robert, I could talk to you for many more hours, so you're going to have to come back on the show. But thank you for being here. And please, everybody out there, get UFOs and Government, a Historical Inquiry. And you can get it on Amazon. And then you can see Robert's amazing lectures out on YouTube. So find him, learn from him. And Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Erica, and have a wonderful week.
You too. Thank you. I'm Erica. Bye-bye. And I am Erica Lewis. We're going to be right up with Dr. Richard Haines. Don't go anywhere.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified.
UFO classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back for our second hour of UFO Classified. I want to thank Robert Powell again for being here on the first hour. Make sure you learn about the Stevensville case and get the book UFOs and Government, A Historical Inquiry, because this is really important to have in your library. There are many, many good, dedicated people out in the field that are willing to mentor and teach us all things and empower a younger generation. My guest right now is no exception, and he is, in my opinion, the top in the world in this field, and it is such an honor to have him back on the show. Dr. Richard Haines is a retired NASA research scientist and former chief of the Space Humans Factor Office at the Ames Research Center, and holds a PhD in experimental psychology from Michigan State University. He worked on the Gemini space program for NASA, among many, many other things. He specializes in visual acuity, and he's author of several books. Most all of them I have in my collection: Observing UFOs, Project Delta, and the book we're going to be talking about tonight, which is CE5, a really great book. And we're going to be talking tonight about, are we alone in the universe? And this is a really, really important question. Before we get to Dr. Haines, I want to say it is vital to Dr. Haines and NARCAP that there is support out there. And I mention NARCAP every single show or all of my lectures, because I think that NARCAP is by far probably the most important organization out there, and they provided good research for all of us. The National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena is a great site where you can read technical reports, and it also has a free ebook written by its chief scientist, Dr. Richard Haines, so you can find that. Go there, donate, and get involved. It's important for all of us. So, Dr. Haines, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Hi, Erica. It's nice to be back, and I look forward to our chat here.
Oh, I do too. This is so much fun. And CE5 is the first book of yours that I bought, CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And just give us a little bit of background. Why did you decide to write this, and at what point in your career, and all the good stuff?
Okay. Well, the book came out in 1999, which tells you that I started it several years before then, to try to evaluate the hypothesis, the working hypothesis, that if there's intelligence behind UAP phenomenon, then they should not exhibit any sort of regular or systematic response to human-initiated contact. In other words, if the phenomenon that is seen, let's say, in the night sky, and the person's out walking their dog, and they have a flashlight, and they happen to flash their light up at this light in the sky, and it flashes back after the flashlight has been turned on and off, let's say in a code, for instance. If that phenomenon up in the sky is natural, like ball lightning or whatever, passive, it will not necessarily mimic the response that the human made beforehand, you see. On the other hand, if there is some intelligence behind the phenomenon, then there could be a better chance of some similarity, let's say, with what the phenomenon does to what the human does. And so I set out to try to kind of prove or disprove that hypothesis. And much to my surprise, after reading a lot and tracking down a lot of cases from around the world, I came up with over 200 examples where people act in a friendly fashion by waving during the day, for instance, or flashing a flashlight, or acting aggressively by shooting a gun or a bow and arrow, or in fact Air Force missiles up into the sky at these things. And what does the phenomenon do in response to the human-initiated contact? So I guess that would be my shortest answer I could give you to that question.
Oh, and what a fascinating thing. And this, you probably were the only one that was really, really doing this at the time. And we haven't seen a lot of engagement about this even now.
Well, no, I'm not sure I could say that, because Dr. Stephen Greer, who you may have heard of, who established SETI, CSETI, I should say, set out to explore that same idea, CE5, from a human-initiated contact point of view, and organized a group to go out into the deserts, for instance, or wherever, and to try to signal the phenomenon to get a response back. And so he is certainly a pioneer in this particular area, and I just kind of contributed to that, I guess you might say.
But it's interesting because you both have two different perspectives. I mean, you are a scientist, and so you're looking at it from that point of view. And I think that Dr. Greer, it's about meditation and maybe not so much of really doing scientific research with regard to what's happening.
Well, okay. Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying. He is a medical doctor, and he tries, I'm sure, to collect as much information as he can, but that's quite different from a more, what I would call a statistical approach, where you try to collect a broad array of information and then draw patterns from it if possible.
Well, and this is so fascinating to me. I'm just loving looking at this and establishing patterns with all of this. Were you, when you first began to research this book, were you surprised by some of the patterns that were emerging?
Oh, yes, very definitely. First of all, I didn't expect to find very many. I was surprised to learn that this is happening around the world, across culture. That human beings are seeing strange things in the sky day and night and are responding in many, many different ways. And so I have a whole chapter devoted to overtly friendly human behavior that then initiates some response from the phenomenon. I have another chapter which really surprised me, to overtly hostile human behavior that then led to a different set of responses from the phenomenon, and that chapter was quite a bit longer than the first one. In other words, we're learning a lot about human behavior, that people tend to respond in fear more than friendly. Okay.
Isn't that, and that is that's a sad sentiment, and I would imagine with some of the cases that you've investigated with NARCAP, and probably some pilots, especially military pilots, that were maybe ordered to engage to shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Or a private pilot, for instance, who's flying along, minding his own business, and an object, an apparently solid object, comes along beside his wingtip, for instance. And so the pilot decides to wiggle his wings, right, which is kind of a universal sign of greeting. It says hi. And lo and behold, the phenomenon beside him wiggles himself. He doesn't have wings, but he might roll a little bit along his flight path. So anyway, going back to this book for just a moment, I have a chapter on friendly human behavior, a chapter on hostile human behavior, which I said is even longer than the other one, and another chapter on responses to human thought. And I'm really out on thin ice there, I must say, from a purely science point of view, because human thought, Dr. Greer believes it may be coherent and focusable, if you will. I can't go along with that myself. I feel it's much more random and, non-focused, let's say. But at any rate, I had to cover that as a possibility, so I have a whole chapter on that. And then finally, a chapter on responses by UAP to miscellaneous kinds of human behavior, okay? So it was fun. It was a good experience. I learned a lot, and it certainly doesn't set anything in concrete, but at least it gets the reader thinking, and hopefully somebody might pick it up and carry it on and take it farther.
Well, and I think that's so important, and I think that we do have to look at all of these aspects to this, and I want to go back to the UFO responses to overtly friendly human behavior. Is there a case with regard to this that sticks out in your mind?
Oh boy,
probably so many.
Well, there are so many. That's right. I can think of many airplane pilot. A great many airplane pilot cases where the phenomenon shows interest in the airplane and approaches it, for instance, and flies along beside it. But when the pilot does something like approach the phenomenon, it speeds away. And there are just so many of those, I can't count them. And most pilots won't even talk about them, of course, for various reasons. In fact, we've talked about that before. That's part of the problem here, is collecting data from a population of witnesses that their jobs are on the line, and they don't want to jeopardize their work.
No, and that I really hope that changes, because this is very real, and it's not only an aviation risk, safety risk, but it's also a security risk
Right.
that we need to be aware of, and I think that we need to understand that we don't know everything in the world, and move forward and find people that can really be forward thinkers and critical thinkers about this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think I'm more concerned about the aggressive human behavior response than I am about the friendly. But we do have to ask the question, friendly to whom? It could be that I'm so anthropomorphically biased to humanity here on this planet that I'm not even a good judge of what might be friendly to another race, visiting technology, for instance. And they might interpret a wave of the arm as a very aggressive sign, you see. You see what I'm saying here?
Absolutely, yes.
So I guess I would caution our listeners today to not get trapped into rather naive ways of assessing human behavior. We can't make any assumptions, really, about how another race, let's say, off-planet race, would behave, respond, understand, communicate, any of these dimensions that we're talking about here.
No, we can't. And I think it's important. And I've talked with NARCAP's executive director, Ted Rowe, about this too. We need to almost view this in a tactical sense. We don't know what motives are. We don't know any of this. And so until we have a better understanding of this, we have to be very critical of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think he's right. And that's a very valuable lesson that we ought to be learning as human beings on this planet.
Yes, that's true. And I think sometimes, with the contact groups, I think that there very well could be some positive, beneficial things that are taking place. But to me, it's you have to have one foot in kind of that reality of things, and know that things are probably not what they seem sometimes. And so you need to be smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I think a useful analogy for me is a picture puzzle. I like picture puzzles. And you open the box and dump out the pieces, and you start putting together, but you usually have the box top to look at. You know what you're kind of ending up with, right? Mm-hmm. And that helps a great deal. We're dealing with a phenomenon here like a picture puzzle, but doesn't have a picture on it. You see?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't want to extend the analogy too far, but
No, that is it's true. It is so true, and I think that how are we as researchers or people wanting to learn more about this? How do we get over that fact? How do we kind of push ourselves forward, researching something we have no clue, what it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a $64 question. Yeah, and that's a challenge for science. Yeah, there's a lot of people that I know personally who maintain very seriously that science is going to be the only approach to understanding this phenomenon, UAP. And I say to them, well, that's not my view, at least. Science certainly is a good tool, and it can take us a certain distance down this road of putting the picture puzzle together, but it won't go all the way. There has to be another, at least one more dimension to our methodology. Science is great, and it has proven itself for several centuries now to be very powerful, but it won't be sufficient. And I believe there has to be another, at least one more dimension, which I would class in the realm of faith, almost in a biblical sense, where you accept things that are unseen. And of course, science does that. It's now beginning to image the atom down to the atomic level. So it's taking less and less faith for a scientist to imagine at the molecular or the atomic level, because our technology has magnified or given us the penetration into those smaller and smaller nano areas of existence. But I think we're going to reach a point, something like outer space, where the bigger the telescope you make, you still have more stars further out, you see.
Mm-hmm.
That, in fact, infinity may be infinity. And if that's the case, then science and technology will not be sufficient.
And that is it. I joined the Society for Scientific Exploration, and it is really interesting to see some of the papers that people have written here, some of the ideas that people are working with and really pushing the boundaries. And I think that that's important for science to do. And I know that sometimes, especially probably science here in the United States, it seems to be a bit slow in that process of changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if you're saying that as a question or a statement.
All of the above. I mean, it's challenging, and I don't know how people like you have done this for so long when sometimes it just seems like you might feel like you're hitting your head against the wall.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think that any field of endeavor that it's young and immature, anybody would feel that way. It's kind of frustrating in a way. Pioneers are always alone, or in a small, distinct group. I'm not saying I'm a pioneer by any means. That's not what I mean. But when we're dealing with a brand new area that doesn't have any very much theoretical foundation, or even empirical foundation for that matter, we're going on intuition sometimes. Best guesses, using common sense as well as rigorous science. And I think that's a wise thing. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
And that is exactly right. And it's amazing. And I think that we can learn so much from people like you, because I know that you're a pioneer in this. And to many others in the field, you absolutely are, because you were taking a scientific approach to this, and you were pushing all of this out there and really doing some important work, especially with NARCAP. And the significance for that is pretty overwhelming.
Well, we hope that we've made a contribution through NARCAP. It's been a long process and uphill. It's not a popular approach because we are at the interface between the UFO field and the aviation world, which is extremely conservative, and has to be, by the way. To me, that's just describing what they are, not any sort of a, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
there.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, we hope that NARCAP will leave a legacy, will encourage new, younger folks to come alongside and join and support and then take leads, and then which we fall back and help them. And so this movement moves forward, and that aviation safety will be improved. Of course, you can never prove that you've prevented an accident. You understand?
Yes.
You can't prove that until an accident's happened, then it's too late. But if we can help pilots become more aware of the safety implications, then we will have at least made a positive contribution to this ever-decreasing curve of accident statistics. Every year from the Boeing company here in Seattle, near where I live, I receive their accident summary for the previous year. And for quite some years now, that curve of the number of accidents or the number of passenger miles without a death keep coming it's going flatter and flatter. And of course people are arguing, well, you can't get below some irreducible minimum, and so we're fine, everything's fine. And I say, okay, that's great, just to tell the survivors of the next accident that, or the loved ones of the people who were killed in the next accident, because you can never get too low. You always want to have zero accidents, and we haven't reached that, you see. And so I'm maintaining, and I've done this publicly, that there are several categories of accidents, aviation accidents, within that Boeing summary, which might well harbor or hide interactions in flight with a UAP. Electromagnetic effects being one example, or cockpit malcoordination. The cockpit crew is so distracted by what's going on outside the airplane, they're not flying the airplane anymore, and so forth. So we're trying to make contribution in those areas at least.
Oh, and that is so, it's wonderful, because I look at what's happening or what's happened historically here in Utah, and these objects have been reported, and there's been radar to back this up in the flight corridor for the international airport, over top secret military installations. And so there is such it's imperative to create greater understanding for this and to make it more palatable for the FAA and pilots, and to really keep everybody, not just the people up in the air, safe, but also all of the people on the ground who could be impacted if some debris fell out of the sky. I mean, there's so many implications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there sure are. That's right. You realize that NARCAP does not, and I repeat, does not deal with anything classified. We've made a policy decision years and years ago about that, and I'm glad we did. And one of the reasons I'm glad is that we have NORAD. You know what NORAD is?
Yes.
North American, okay. That's their domain, and they have access to everything, and we don't. And so they're best suited to evaluate, investigate these close encounters at 30,000 feet that involve military jets, for instance, or the president's plane, for instance. We don't have access to that kind of data, so we leave that to them. On the other hand, there are thousands and thousands of private pilots and commercial pilots, more than that, flying around who, when they do report, will not necessarily be picked up by NORAD. If they are, we don't know what NORAD does with it, since that could be classified.
And I've got to just stop you right there, because I can hear my music, and I'm so sorry, but we're going to talk about that when we get back. So I'm Erica Lutz. We'll be back in a moment.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. after this.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Erica Lukes, and this is KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network, home of a lot of wonderful shows and the best producer and station owner I can think of, Tina Marie. Thank you for all you do, Tina, to produce a great show for me and have a wonderful station. This is a pre-recorded show tonight because I am in Laughlin, Nevada, speaking at StarWorks Symposium, and so make sure you go to my Facebook page and you can see updates and photos from my time at the conference. I am here tonight with somebody that I speak about frequently. In fact, I was in New Mexico and mentioned in my lecture, I was talking about the importance of NARCAP and Dr. Richard Haines, who is the chief scientist of NARCAP. And his bio is incredible. He's a retired NASA research scientist and former chief of Space Human Factors Office at the Ames Research Center. He's written many books, and including one that is CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, that we have been talking about. And we're going to go back to that just for a minute. And I want people to know about the work that you did with this and with regard to UFO responses to friendly behavior and hostile behavior, and how you really felt that you had to do a lot more work on the hostile behavior. You had a lot more stuff to look at here.
That's right. Stepping back for just a moment from the book itself, I would really urge your listeners who are interested, motivated enough to take a project that they're interested in and to really get into it, like I did with collecting and analyzing this data for CE5, that they can make a real contribution to this field. But it takes work. It takes effort and time, as you well know, Erica. You've been in this for quite some time now, and it's not just a hobby, and it's not a pastime. It should be a serious endeavor. And I'm sure that some of your listeners are ready, willing, and able to do that, and they just need a little encouragement to move forward and do it. And so
Absolutely.
I really want to, get that message across. Back to the book for just a minute. As I said earlier, I found more examples of aggressive human behavior than I did of friendly human behavior. And this, to me, says probably more about the human than it does about the alien, if there was aliens involved. And let me go to page 164, where I've got some summary data that I could share with you, which I seem to remember pretty important. Here's the overview. Here, let me read something to you. Here are some UFO or UAP responses to bright lights, okay? Of the 63 incidents in which some type of light was aimed or flashed at the UAP, here's what the craft or the phenomena did. In 27% of the cases, it left right away. In another 25%, it became brighter or changed color. In 17.5%, it approached the witness. In 16% of the cases, it repeated the flash sequence. And in 11 cases, it disappeared or did something else in 7 cases. In only 3%, it did not move or paced the vehicle in 2 cases, okay? Here's what the UAP did when a person waved, shouted, or gave other arm gestures. Of the 6 incidents in which this happened, 50% of the cases, the object or phenomenon approached the witness. In 16%, he departed in one case, and in 33% did something else, okay? And finally, when a UAP was responding to an airplane movement up in the sky, flying along, there were 7 incidents in which I found that happening. And in 86% of those cases, the object or phenomenon accelerated away, okay? I'm saying this is friendly behavior. This is not hostile. This is friendly. That accelerating away, I think, is really very important because so far, at least, we have not identified a natural phenomenon which would do that. We may find one, but we haven't yet. And I think that is quite significant.
It is.
It implies intelligence. It implies perhaps a threat, a human threat to their well-being. Another interpretation is that they're simply showing off their technology and advanced capability and departing very quickly. But they left. They departed. Okay. That I turned to the wrong chapter. I'm sorry, and that was for friendly human behavior. I do want to get to the unfriendly behavior. Here it is. This is on page 245. What does the UAP do when a human being fires a weapon at it, either from the ground or the air? I found 33 cases from around the world, different cultures, where these following characteristics were reported. First of all, in speed and motion, 42% of the cases, the UAP reacted immediately in some way. In other words, it didn't wait to be shot at again, which is a sign of intelligence. In 18% of the cases, the UAP never moved or reacted at all. And an interpretation is that they're impervious, they're somehow protected from bullets or rockets or whatever was fired at them, and they didn't need to worry, okay? Let's see. In cases where the object, changed visibility. Oh, okay. In 15% of the cases found where the object changed color or brightness, the object brightened significantly in 15% of the cases. It emitted a visible beam or ray of light in 9% of the cases. It reacted by not changing at all in 9%, and it reacted by becoming invisible in 6% of the cases. And in another 6%, it reacted by changing color. Okay. There are also some cases where the object changed its sound, the sounds it made when the bullet ricocheted off its surface. Very interesting cases. One from Korea that I interviewed the GI in, I think, 1951. Very, very interesting case. Finally, to wrap this up, what happens with a UAP that is responding to a military airplane that's approaching it and or firing its weapons at it? Well, the answer is, in 41% of those instances, the UAP reacted by outmaneuvering the airplane, which to me, again, is not just intelligence, but a pretty high technology, energy management in the larger sense. Okay, in 23% of the cases, the UAP reacted by destroying the airplane. Think about that.
Wow.
In 17% of the cases, the UAP reacted in other ways. And let's see, in 12% of the cases, the UAP reacted by accelerating away. And in one case, which is about 6%, the UAP reacted by becoming invisible. So shooting a weapon at this phenomenon changes its very visibility, which raises some fantastic questions, about its nature, about its characteristic. Well, these statistics, you can say they're all witness lies or hoaxes, they're made-up stories. I can't believe that 200 people from such a wide variety of cultures, languages, age groups, religions, belief systems would all be making up these kinds of very creative stories. I just can't believe that.
Right. Absolutely. And there's so many common elements that we've seen in not only, in the past few decades, but over centuries, the same common themes. And I think that's very, very curious. But with regard to the UFOs destroying the airplanes in 4 cases, 23% of the cases, what can you give me a specific case where this happened?
And not without opening the book up
Okay.
again. Yeah, right.
I know. I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I realize you've been doing some very good work there in Utah on this case. Have you found any evidence yourself in a CE5 event? Kind of a response back to what the human did?
You know what? I just had a person tell me about an experience. This is, secondhand, but her father was in the military and he was out at the UTTR and they were flying helicopters and they saw these objects. There were 5 helicopters and apparently the communications started going haywire between each individual helicopter and they had their night vision goggles on and they could see these spheres that were pretty close and this fellow said that they appeared, one would come on and then the other one and the other one. And he said that he felt that they were blinking in not in a random pattern, but that they were trying to communicate something to them. And so I'm trying to
follow up on that.
I am trying my hardest to follow up on that. And I know that it's sometimes when you have people in the military, as you know, it's tricky to get to them and then people don't want to do that. So I just keep trying and I keep collecting cases. And then the more I talk about it, the more people come forward and share things with me. So it's just, like you say, putting together a puzzle without a picture to look at.
Yeah. Well, I encourage you to continue because you're doing some good work. And you have a team to help you, right?
I do. My research partner, Jeff Cox, who has been incredible and knows a lot about aviation safety, he's been working with me and we've been analyzing a lot of data and we're definitely finding that there are significant patterns here and we're seeing sightings clusters in areas that are kind of on the periphery of some of the military installations and by the Salt Lake International Airport. So these are all intriguing things that we're looking at and just trying to figure out why would these sightings clusters be taking place? Is there something, a mineral or rare earth content? Is it the actual base that they're monitoring? There's so many questions, I could come up with and we're looking at all of them.
Sure. Well, and if you did find a firm link, let's say with flight safety, what would you do with it? Who would you tell?
Everyone that would listen. I would march right down to the FAA headquarters here, which they know me and they've been really, really wonderful. I would try to get a hold of obviously NARCAP. I would work with you and have all of you help me with that. But I would get out there and then I would also talk to people that are involved in politics here to get support because you have to start, it's a grassroots thing and you can't just go to one place. It has to be a kind of a mobilization of the troops.
That's right. Exactly. You realize, of course, that our airspace is crisscrossed by fantastic number of radio frequencies. Microwave, let's say EM frequencies, all the time, 24/7. And that if something is reflecting in a radar sense some of those frequencies and being recorded, then the civil authorities as well as the military authorities already know about it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that this phenomenon we're dealing with may have stealth technology that we don't even begin to understand. And that the airport surveillance radars, for instance, might pick something up, and then the phenomenon would switch into a stealth mode and disappear. And in that case, the civilian and perhaps even the military personnel have lost contact with it. Once you lose contact with a phenomenon, it becomes a danger, potential danger to flight.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
So what would you do? What would be your first line of defense, or who would you contact first?
Well, first of all, yes, that's a good question, and a very serious question, because we're dealing with the potential for panic, for one thing, and incredulity for another, and a skeptic audience who doesn't want to believe it in the first place. So we have to be very careful to document fully what we're doing. We tried to do that with the O'Hare case. Are you familiar with the O'Hare?
Oh yes, that's a big case.
Of
Yes.
course it is. And as far as we know, it didn't even show up on FAA radar. I don't mean radar, but FAA concern. They showed no concern. They wrote it off in spite of the level of evidence that we all collectively came up with. And that's nothing but an illustration of the skepticism and closed-mindedness that we face in this field. So you raise a fundamental question: what do we do with it? We have to document extremely carefully as much as we can, and then simply present it, as we did with the O'Hare case, in front of the authorities and leave it with them. We can't force them to do anything. Since it was not an accident, I'm speaking now of the O'Hare case, because it was not an accident, the National Transportation Safety Board did not get involved. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization in Montreal, did not get involved. And so it died. And the report lies, decaying in files, and nobody seems to care. It's just they've gone under. People have gone on to more interesting, sexy cases, I guess you might say, and this case just died.
And that, to me, when I look back at some of these historical cases, even going back to, the Blue Book cases, which I've been looking at here in Utah, and that have to do with Hill Air Force Base and Dugway and things like that. I don't know. You have to look at all of these really important cases because it establishes a pattern.
Do you think so?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And who are you telling that to? How are you documenting that?
Oh boy, I am documenting that I have file cabinets. I'm not quite as up to speed with you, but then I'm sharing that with my research partner. I want to write papers. I'm lecturing about this. And so I'm just trying to, oh my gosh, just get the word out and get people involved in communicating about these ideas and remembering cases.
Sure. Well, good. I encourage you to continue to do that. And it's a movement we're talking about, isn't it? It's a social movement.
It is.
It's a fledgling science, and science always kind of develops slowly and very conservatively. And until there's money, I hate to say this, but until there's support, financial support for serious researchers like graduate students in school to support themselves on serious research, we're going to make precious little progress.
You're correct, and I know that you and I have talked about before Erling Strand and Project Hessdalen and the great work that they've done over there. And I think if you look at people that have been pretty good about getting funding and engaging the scientific community and also empowering younger kids, students to really look at this in a scientific perspective, I think that's a great example for all of us here.
Yes, it is. It's a great model. And what they have that we don't, basically, is a phenomenon which repeats itself, and that opens itself up to science, of course. Now, we have the Marfa lights down in Texas, and there should be, from my point of view, there should be a dedicated team that stays down near Marfa and gets to the bottom of it. And as far as I know, that hasn't happened. That for some reason, we here in America don't have quite the same motivational drive as this group of international investigators in Hesteland in Norway. We should. We have the capability. We have great possibilities to do high-quality work of the Marfa lights. And by the way, Marfa is just a tip of the iceberg. There are lights that Paul Devereaux and others have been documenting for decades now around the world of recurrent, phenomena generally near the surface of the Earth rather than at high altitude. NARCAP deals usually with higher altitude phenomena, mid-altitude, stratosphere and below. So Marfa becomes a possibility to duplicate what Erling and his group is doing in Hesteland.
And that is, it's really neat. I've got Paul Devereaux, one of his books here too, and I look at that and read that as a research along with Mysterious Fire and Light and some of the Trevor James Constable got a couple of his books. But, you know, it's just interesting because there are places like this, like Brown Mountain, like the Nim Nim lights, all of these places where you do see that. And we need to really take a more proactive approach here in the States and then get people in there to do field research because we have enough data.
Yeah, I agree with you. You could almost argue that we don't need any new data. We just need to do a good job of analyzing what we've got. And I say that hoping that our aviation officials would open up data to us, let's say after the fact, to do this level of gold mining. We're gold miners. We're looking for precious metal underground, digging down into the ground into caves, if you will, not knowing where the gold is, but seeking it as best we can, and sometimes losing direction in the process because underground you lose your direction. It's an analogy which may be weak, but nonetheless, gold has value. The phenomenon, I think, have real value. And there should be a lot more miners out there looking for it.
Well, hopefully we can do something about that. If I have anything to say about it, we will. And it's so important to have you on the show again. I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing your wisdom and I think inspiring definitely a younger generation. This is how we will make great accomplishments. So thank you very, very much.
Well, it's very kind of you to say.
Yes, and I want to just tell all of my listeners out there, please go to narcap.org and donate because truly, if you look at any organization, they have the best information, the best technical reports, brightest minds in the world involved with NARCAP, and it's important to support organizations like this. And then also go to Amazon and get CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, or Observing UFOs. Some of my favorite books. I love it. And thank you, Dr. Haines, for being here. And we will have you on very soon again. So prepare yourself.
Okay. It's my pleasure, and have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you to everyone out there. Make sure you find me on Facebook at UFOclassified.com. And I will be on my website posting my upcoming guest for next week pretty quickly, so stay tuned. Thanks for your support. You stay safe and stick around for a great night of Ladies on KCOR.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This